How's it going, everyone? I see the BBC are in trouble. Hierarchies falling on swords, left, right and centre. It does make me laugh though. Because two reasons it makes me laugh. One is those that are in shock at what the BBC have done in terms of, editing a speech of Donald Trump, to make him look worse than he is. That takes some doing. But the fact that people are shocked by that, they're shocked that even in 2025, nearly 2026, that the BBC or the mainstream media in general would just make stuff up. So that makes me laugh, that there's shock. The other thing that makes me laugh is the selective outrage from certain quarters. So editing a video with Donald Trump to make him look worse than he is the end of the world to some people. Well, yeah, it's pretty bad. But when you're comparing it to Jimmy Savile and what was going on there in terms of the BBC, and people looking the other way, turning a blind eye and all that sort of stuff, and people will go, oh, well, that's historic, that was in those days, that was in the 80s, everything was mad in the 80s. Well, yeah, kind of, it was in some ways. That was still pretty wrong though, wasn't it? But Hugh Edwards wasn't in the 80s when he'd been, downloading and looking at child porn and all that kind of stuff, and they kept him on a massive salary. Even though he was banged to rights. That wasn't in the 80s, was it? That was just 5 minutes ago. And people didn't seem that outraged when they were basically making up stuff about chemical weapons in Douma being used by the Assad regime, stuff that was used to propagandise the public and basically manufacture our consent in terms of the toppling of the Assad regime. That's gone well, isn't it? We've got Al-Qaeda leaders there in charge now, so that's good. I mean, I know he's shaved his beard and he's put a suit on, so he's not a terrorist anymore, because that's how it works. But still, life's not good for Syrian people, is it? And no one was really that outraged when the BBC was faking all that nonsense. And when the BBC were reporting that Building 7 had collapsed about 20 minutes before it had, and the fact that you could even see it over her shoulder in the footage, no one was overly outraged about that particularly, were they? And during the whole COVID debacle, when they were lying for fun, when they were essentially just they've always been the state propaganda arm, and when I say the state propaganda arm, I mean the permanent government propaganda arm, which is why it doesn't matter who gets in, the BBC will go with their narrative. A lot of people claim that the BBC have a particular side. Well, not really. They have the side that's in ascendance, basically, because that's who's in charge of them. That's who they're answering to. That's what makes me laugh when they're like, it's a state broadcaster, as if it means we own it, as if it's the people. No, it is the state broadcaster. It's broadcasting the state propaganda. It's not about me and you. And I've got no skin in the game for them. Obviously, I've not paid my TV license for frickin' years. I don't watch it. If I'm gonna get lied to, I'd rather get lied to for free. I don't have to pay for it. That's just sort of like adds insult to injury, doesn't it? But like I say, there's selective outrage. So all that stuff's fine. All the COVID stuff was fine when they were pushing the propaganda in terms of locking people down and getting people vaccinated, and well, it's not a vaccine. Let's have it right. Getting people poisoned, and pushing all that stuff. There wasn't a lot of outrage then. I mean, there was outrage from you probably, ladies and gentlemen, there was outrage from me. But in terms of from the rest of the state, from other broadcasters who are now, can't find a microphone quick enough to slag off the BBC as being, state propaganda or whatever, they weren't doing it then, when they were basically playing their role in destroying the country now and the people of this country. Now, the reason all the other media outlets that are all losing their bobbleheads over this weren't losing their bobbleheads over all that propaganda is because they were doing it and all. And they were all in on it as well. And do you know who else was in on it? Donald freaking Trump. But I think there's more to play, more at play rather here, than just editing a video of Donald Trump. For some reason, and it's shocking to me, but for some reason the BBC has started in the last 2 years sneaking a little bit of truth in there. Not a lot, but a little bit of truth, particularly when it comes to Israel. They wouldn't touch Israel before, ladies and gentlemen. I remember being at a protest 2014, might have been 2015, in London against the murder of thousands of Palestinians, including hundreds and hundreds of children, because, you know, it didn't start on October 7th. I don't know who still needs to hear that, but it didn't. And so there's about 100,000 of us in the streets of London protesting. Not a pip, not a single pip in the news. BBC didn't cover it, no one covered it. It was like it never happened. And so the following week, I think it was about 150,000 went, and we started at the BBC and we surrounded it, and you basically shut it down. And they had no choice then but to report it, but they obviously reported it as a bit of a nuisance. But at least they reported it, the fact that there were hundreds, you know, well over 100,000 people on the streets of London to protest against this mass killing in Gaza. Now the reason they didn't want to report it is because they were rabidly pro-Israel, and they always have been, despite what people say now. But in the last 2 years, a few little bits and bobs have snuck in there. A few little bits of truth have got in there. And that's quite strange for the mainstream media. You know, Channel 4, who I'm not a fan of either, they'll get a few nuggets in there of truth, surrounded by a load of bullshit, obviously, but they'll get a few nuggets of truth in there. But the BBC would never dare. They wouldn't. But in the last 2 years, they've started. And now suddenly, just as you know, more and more anger has come from the Israeli embassy in London, who have been calling out the BBC just in recent days, and other Zionist groups and pro-Israel groups and pro-Israel lobbyists and pro-Israel influencers have all started tearing into the BBC. Suddenly this whole furore about Donald Trump and the editing of a video comes out to the fore, and people fall on their swords. Now, I'm not condoning lying, not even about Donald Trump, who obviously I don't like, but I'm not condoning lying. That's not your job. Just report what happened. That's your job as a news outlet. But again, when I come to hypocrisy, when they were reporting on Jeremy Corbyn and basically attempting to destroy Jeremy Corbyn on behalf of the Israel lobby, there was no real outrage. I mean, there were outrage amongst Corbyn supporters who were saying, you've basically made it look like he's got like a beret, you've put him with like a red background, as they were trying to basically plant the seed that he was a Russian asset, essentially. That's what they were trying to do. But whilst there was a bit of outrage from Corbyn supporters who could see what they were trying to do, none of the other media outlets were whinging about it. None of them were coming out like they are now, going, oh my goodness me, look at what the BBC are doing, look at this propaganda. Do you know why? Because just like COVID, they were doing it too. And so they were fine with it. Whereas this time, they're all over it. Now, what will be interesting in the wake of Larry Ellison's takeover of TikTok and Larry Ellison's takeover of CNN and PBS and all these other outlets in America on behalf of Israel in terms of controlling the narrative, let's see who takes over the BBC. Let's see how BBC editorial change comes in when it comes to the Middle East. And just finally, while we're on the subject of propaganda, now yes, shouldn't be, you know, for the 100th time, shouldn't be editing videos of Donald Trump to make him look like he's saying stuff he's not saying. He says enough bad stuff anyway. Shouldn't be doing that. Wrong. However, if we're going on impartiality and fairness, which is what it should be, like I say, a news outlet's job is to report what happened. That's why it bugs me when they say, oh, no, they're a left-wing organisation or news organisation, or they're a right-wing news organisation. I don't care what wing you are, mate. Just tell me what happened. I don't need your spin on it. Tell me what happened. But that said, when we're in that, you know, we're calling for impartiality and all that, their main Middle Eastern, senior Middle Eastern correspondent, a guy called Ravi Berg, he's just gloated about the fact that he was hanging out with Mossad agents. He lists a Mossad agent among his friendship group, and in this speech to camera that he's giving, he's talking about how amazing it felt to be basically invited into the circle of trust with these Mossad agents. What? That's not journalism, mate. And actually, if you look behind him while he's giving this speech, you'll see he's got a framed letter from Benjamin Netanyahu, the genocidal maniac prime minister and wanted war criminal of Israel. So where's the impartiality? So am I going to expect you, Mr. Ravi Berg, who feels like it's an honour to be welcomed into the circle of trust by Mossad agents, the same Mossad agents that, you know, bug pagers and all sorts, and in the past in Lebanon have bugged toys to blow up and blow kids to pieces. Good people. You're welcomed into their circle of trust and you're honoured to be in their circle of trust, and you've got a framed picture, or a framed letter, sorry, from the Prime Minister of Israel. I'm supposed to believe that you're impartial when it comes to your reporting on the Middle East, given your job role is literally the senior correspondent on Middle Eastern affairs. Now, I'm all for impartiality, folks, but it's got to work both ways. Otherwise, it's not impartial, is it? It's still propaganda. Now, for me, I'd be done with any state broadcaster because, you know, like I said earlier, people try and sell the idea of a state broadcaster as being, you know, by the people and for the people. Well, it's not. It's by the state gophers for the public image of the state. That's all it's there for. And so, for me, no government should have its own propaganda arm, because that's not journalism. That's not what journalism is. Journalism is about asking the difficult questions and digging around a bit and getting to the truth, not to the truth that the state would want the people to believe. That's not what it's about. And so any state broadcaster, for me, is onto a hiding for nothing. I think that it should be independent. It should be independent journalists that scratch away at the surface of a particular issue, or a particular policy, or whatever, to get to the truth. Because if the state runs the journalist, it's not a journalist. It's essentially doing what Benjamin Netanyahu does in Israel, which is mark his own homework all the time. Well, it's going to give itself an A star then, isn't it?